Well, good morning. Let's start the service with a song today. Let's rise in body or spirit, and let's sing number 361 in the gray hymnal, and rejoice and come in. be seated. A great way to start the service with a little enthusiasm. Well, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Venice, or UCOV, which is much easier to say. Each one of you is very welcome, no matter who you are, whomever you choose to love, wherever you are on your journey, we bid you welcome. We're delighted you chose to let me try that once more. We are delighted you chose to be with us today. We hope you will find something in today's service that inspires you. My name is Dave Lyon, and I will be your worship associate this morning. If you'd like to learn more about UCOV and all that we offer to stimulate learning and connection, please visit our website at uucov.org, and also check out our website on Facebook. If you're joining us online, we're excited to have you join our service today, and we say good morning to you. Is anybody visiting us here for the first time that's brave enough to stand up and tell us your name and where you're from? And if you are, hang on, Gina. She'll bring you a microphone here so the people at home can hear.
Ann McClellan is my name. I came with my neighbor and friend Roxy, and this is my first time. I'm a snowbird. I spend the part of my year in New Hampshire, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, we got a couple over here. Over here on the right. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Good morning. My name is Diane Goss. I recently moved to Venice from St. Pete Beach. I got out just in time. And I'm originally from Pennsylvania and then Long Island. I moved to Grand Palm, and this is my first time here. I belong to the Paso Grill UCC Church, and I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm glad you chose to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne, and I'm not new, but I've been coming for a couple months. But I wanted to introduce my daughter from Asheville. So we're talking a lot about mud and sand. Yeah, and trees. Yeah. Okay. So, thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
We're glad you're here. Anybody else? And let's acknowledge those that have returned from the north and missed the hurricanes. I saw the Simons are back, Jan and Steve. I saw Lori over here. Anybody else back that I didn't mention? Yes, okay. Roxy right here is back. So they're starting to come in. We're sorry you missed the excitement of the hurricane. Hurricane 1 and Hurricane 2. So let's just take a minute here since we're, and greet your neighbor. We haven't done that for a while, but just turn and say hello to your neighbor. This is what friends do. Okay, we have announcements on the back of your order of service. We also have an announcement from John Van Camp, and while John's making his way up here, I'll read another announcement. On November 3rd and 10th. Community Outreach will collect hygiene products on the lanai for CHAPS. CHAPS provides food and hygiene items without cost to people in need living with HIV/AIDS and their dependents. See Janet Knutson for a list of specific items needed. If you'd prefer to write a check, make it out to UCOV and write CHAPS on the memo line. John?
Good morning. I'm John Van Camp, and I'm here on behalf of the social justice team at UCOV. And we're already starting to look at next year. Soon the team will be gathering to look at what issues should we focus on. With this coming election, however that goes, there's going to be a whole host of issues that we have to address. How do we create a civil society? How do we create a level playing field of opportunity for everyone to succeed? So to do that, we want to be informed by what issues you would like us to address. So after the service on November 10, which is right after the election, we're going to have a brief meeting of everyone interested to share with us what you would like the justice team to focus on next year. If you have any ideas before then, please see me. Thank you.
I have one quick announcement, Dave. Choir is starting. Woo! We're going to have a team of directors this year, a rotating cast. And if you haven't tried the choir before, maybe you're new, you want to try it, or you've been in there in the past, you want to come back. We are starting on Thursday with a couple of simple songs that we will sing on next Sunday. So come give us a try. 4 o'clock Thursday here in the sanctuary.
Yes, Roxy.
Hi, my name is Roxy Platt, and I do the transitions work group, and am I starting back up? And I haven't picked a day yet and time. I'm trying to look around what is in existence. But that sign-up sheet will be out in the Lanai next Sunday with that time and so on and so forth in it. So those who want to come back, I welcome you, and those who might be interested, feel free to ask me about it.
For our chalice lighting, I selected a piece titled "Let Us Look First to the Response of Love" by Maureen Killorn. And she writes, "In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement so that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first to the response of love." Every Sunday she's good. I selected a responsive reading that I liked. It's written by a gentleman named Gandhi. So I'll start and you can follow. If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in nonviolent action. The winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope. Nonviolence is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being. Nonviolence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is a plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely. If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions. If we are to reach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children. The future depends on what we do in the present. And let's rise in body and spirit and sing hymn number 34 in the gray hymnal. Though I may speak with bravest fire. Seated. Well, it's time for our offering. And as Reverend Amy says, giving is a sacred practice. When you give to your church, you also receive. As usual, our offering words are offered with levity, because giving should always happen with a smile. So here we go. This one has Sister Mary. So for you former Catholics, you can relate to Sister Mary, little gray, white-haired lady. She works for a home health care agency, and she was out making her rounds visiting homebound patients when she ran out of gas. As luck would have it, a gas station was just a block away. So she walked to the station to borrow a gas can and buy some gas. But the attendant told her the only gas can they owned had been lent out and hadn't been returned, but she could wait until it was returned. But since this nun was on the way to see a patient, she decided not to wait and walked back to her car. She looked for something in her car that she could fill with gas and spotted the bedpan that she was taking to the patient. Always resourceful, she carried the bedpan to the station, filled it with gas, and carried the full bedpan back to her car. As she was pouring the gas into the tank, two men watched from across the street. One of them turned to the other and said, "If it starts, I'm turning Catholic." This morning's collection will now be taken and graciously received. Thank you for your generosity and all you do to sustain the life of this congregation. It's time for celebrations and sorrows. A church is not a building, but the people. We come together to share our laughter and our tears. You can raise a hand and a microphone will arrive via Gene, and you can share with the congregation. Our marshal's also got a microphone over here, so just raise your hand if you'd like to share either a celebration, a milestone, a sorrow.
So I have both a celebration and a sorrow. The celebration is I celebrate all of you who have voted and who have put your tag out there and said you voted. The sorrow is for those who haven't either voted or put your tag out there. UCOV, Amy has challenged other congregations here locally and nationally, and we said we're going to get to 100%, and there's a prize for that. Well, we're only 50% there. So next week, I want to hear more celebrations than sorrows.
Thank you.
Anybody else? It's a quiet group today. Okay. May the gratitudes and celebrations among us this day become a blessing to us all. May the concerns and sorrows of those be shared in all our hearts. A burden shared is a load lightened. We're going to enter a period here of meditation, thought, or prayer. So let's prepare for it. You may wish to adjust your position so that your spine is straight, your body is relaxed, your hands resting gently in your lap. You will probably want to close your eyes and shut out all the distractions of the light. Let us begin. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Mr. J.B. Miller. He's a lifelong Mennonite who grew up in Pinecraft, the Amish Mennonite enclave in Sarasota. He speaks to numerous groups and teaches classes about the Amish and Mennonites. Since retiring in 2014, he has spent time researching the history of the Pinecraft community, and he currently attends a Covenant Mennonite Fellowship, which he will tell you about here in Sarasota. So let's give a warm welcome to Mr. J.B. Miller.
Good morning. Dave, I appreciate the story you told about the nun, but I'm going to steal it. But when I tell the story, it's going to be a plainly dressed Mennonite woman. So I think people will understand that also. So, well, I appreciate the invitation to come here this morning and spend a few minutes with you talking about Mennonites and Amish and the Pinecraft community, as well as a little bit about our congregation in Sarasota. As the introduction mentioned, I grew up in Pinecraft. My parents I was 9 when we moved here in 1956, and my parents were born into Amish homes, and when I was born in 1947, they had just left the Amish church 2 years before, and they had moved from Ohio to Virginia Beach, Virginia. My dad was a farmer in those days, and they had moved away from the old order Amish church, but were part of a very conservative group called Beachy Amish, and the difference between they and the Amish was that we had cars, electricity, and telephones. Beyond that, if you saw pictures of us when I was young, and my mother and father in those days, we looked very much like old order Amish folks, but we had a few more things. And I think sometimes it's helpful to, I'm looking for my clicker here. Oh, here we go. I think it's helpful to think about Mennonites and Amish, and if you remember the title that you saw, the title was called "The Many Faces of the Amish and Mennonites," and one idea that undergirds what I'm going to talk about today is that this sort of represents the many faces of Mennonites and Amish. Hopefully you can see it, but at the very top, it says Amish and Mennonites Continuum of Beliefs and Practices. And at the top line there's the word Amish, and then it says at the left side, conservative, and on the other side of it, the other part of that line, it says progressive. And on the bottom there, then we see Mennonites, we see conservative, and we see progressive as well. And then there's a circle in there, and in that circle are several things that both progressive Amish and conservative Mennonites still hold to. So the number one question that I always get is, how do you tell the difference between Amish and Mennonites? And at a particular point, it's very difficult. It's becoming increasingly difficult because these groups are under a period of change right now, particularly the Amish, and I'll talk just a little bit about that. But some of the common beliefs or practices at the progressive end of the Amish and at the conservative end of the Mennonites would be such things as horse and buggy. They still use horse and buggies. There are old order Mennonites who still use horse and buggies for transportation. They still have distinctive garb among the more conservative. You'll see some of that when you're out and about in Sarasota. They also have they're very much focused on educational restrictions. My family is a typical example of a family that moved along that particular line from conservative to more progressive. For instance, I have 4 older siblings. Beginning with my parents, my mother only went to the 7th grade, my father only went to the 8th grade. My 4 oldest siblings, with an age span, when I was born, my next oldest sister was 6 years older, and my 4 older siblings only have an 8th grade education as well. They also all eventually got a GED certificate. My 1 older brother did some college work as well. But that shows the progression of what happens as people move along that line. I have a bachelor's degree from Eastern Mennonite University, and I have a master's degree from Wake Forest University. I had tolerant parents. They were moving along on that particular continuum. One of the other commonalities is the use of Pennsylvania Dutch, or Pennsylvania Deutsch, Pennsylvania German, which is a dialect that most Amish speak, and that was my first language. So when you meet an Amish person, or if somebody tells me, I know so-and-so, he's Amish, and they will say, well, that's, they believe this or that. I say, well, when you know one Amishman, you know one Amishman. And I went to Wake Forest as a graduate student, and in my business school there, I was the only Mennonite in the school, and to many people, I was the only Mennonite they had ever met. They thought, well, where's your, one guy said, where's your horse and buggy? He was joking, of course, but the point was that I always felt some pressure because I recognized that when people think about Mennonites who were in my class, they think about me, and I'm not sure I was always the best example, but nevertheless, I think it's very helpful as I talk today to think about that. But we're going to begin talking just a little bit about the historical context for Mennonites and Amish. As a number of Protestant groups, we grew out of the Protestant Reformation that began with Martin Luther in 1517. That particular Protestant Reformation spread throughout Europe, and there was a group of people in Zurich, Switzerland, who became known as the Radical Reformers, and they believed in certain things that the other Protestants did not. For instance, they believed that only adults should be baptized, and they believed in a separation of the church and the state. They did not believe that you should baptize your babies, but it should be something that is done as an adult. And so these radical reformers in 1525 held a baptismal service in Zurich, Switzerland, and about 25 people were baptized at that particular time. And this particular group became known as Anabaptists, rebaptizers. For whatever reason, this was seen as a huge threat to the power structure at that particular time, and it set off a time of persecution and retribution against these Anabaptists. And from the first martyrdom, the first martyr for their faith was a man by the name of Felix Mons, who was one of the persons who was baptized in 1525. In 1527, he was captured by the authorities and taken out to the Lamont River and drowned. And between 1527 and 1614, there were somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 Anabaptists who were martyred, burned at the stake, beheaded, or drowned. Those were the 3 modes of death for them. As a result, these Anabaptists scattered throughout Europe, but the movement continued to grow. And as these Anabaptists moved throughout that part of Europe, other people became adherents, and one of those adherents was a man by the name of Menno Simons. In 1536, he left the Catholic priesthood in Witmarsum, the Netherlands, and became an Anabaptist. Menno Simons believed very much in pacifism, and that was the tenets of the Anabaptists as well. And he became a significant speaker as far as Anabaptism was concerned throughout the Netherlands and other parts of Europe at that particular time. And his followers became known as Mennonites. Eventually that moved into Mennonites, and so that's where we get the word Mennonite today. So it was named for someone by the name of Menno Simons, previously a Catholic priest. As many movements go, they evolve and change. Particularly the Dutch Mennonites, those in the Netherlands, over the years they had become quite prosperous, and they had been more or less assimilated into Dutch society. That wasn't so true in Switzerland and Germany and Austria, where there continued to be persecution. The Netherlands was the first country where they quit putting Anabaptists to death. That was the first country that forbade that. So, and over time, the Dutch became quite prosperous. They were great farmers, but they were also very, very good business people. And this was of concern to the Anabaptists in Central Europe, particularly in Germany and so forth. And there was a call for church renewal, and a man who led that particular church renewal, what he was concerned about were such things as practicing shunning or putting people in the ban for those that had become Anabaptists, but then had moved, in his opinion, moved away from the faith. He was also concerned about how frequently or infrequently communion was being served, and there were a number of other issues that were of concern to him and his followers. And in 1693, he led a schism of the Anabaptists, and Jacob Ammon's followers became known as the Amish. And so, as a result, that was the growth, or that was the birth of what today we know as the Amish, the Old Order Amish group. The persecution that ensued during this particular period meant that Mennonites and Amish were always looking for some place to go where they could have more freedom. They were particularly interested in having their own property, because in some of the areas they weren't allowed to have property. They were also obviously interested in living in places where they could practice their own faith. And so as a result, as America became available, Mennonites and Amish began immigrating to America. They came initially at the invitation of William Penn, even though the Quakers are not considered Anabaptist. He promised the Amish and Mennonites that they could come here, they could practice their faith, they would be free from conscription, and they would have freedom of religion in addition to getting land when they came. At the same time, in the 1670s, Catherine the Great invited Mennonites from the Netherlands and Poland to come and settle what was part of her empire, the Russian Empire, and she gave them the same freedom of religion, and gave them huge acreages of property, and hundreds of Mennonites moved to what today is the Ukraine, and they became very prosperous as well. So if you think about the map of Europe, as people were leaving Germany and Switzerland, moving into the Netherlands, some of the Mennonites moved east into Ukraine, some of the Mennonites and Amish moved west to America and eventually Canada. So that's kind of the history of how Mennonites and Amish came to America. The first Mennonites came in 1683, and the first Amish came in 1737. Oh, sorry. So here's a picture, and this kind of gets to the point of how do you tell the difference between Amish and Mennonites? And this is a picture of four Amish ladies. Four ladies, one of which is Amish and three are Mennonites. And if you look, you can probably figure out that the woman on the right is the Old Order Amish woman. The other three are Mennonite women, conservatively dressed Mennonite women. And by virtue of the fact that the three women who are Mennonites all have a different head covering, that would indicate to me that even though they may go to church here in Sarasota together in the wintertime, they probably go to different congregations up north, because the covering generally gives away distinctions between one congregation and another. So that's just a little clue there that you look at. So these are three conservatively dressed women and one Amish woman. Here's a group of people that are all Mennonites, and this is the way the vast majority of Mennonites in North America look today, just like us. If you were to go to any of the Mennonite congregations in Sarasota, with 2 or 3 exceptions, you would not stand out as being what the Amish would call English. They use that term for anyone who is not Mennonite, or Amish, they would say, well, they're English. But this is typically what a lot of Mennonite congregations look like today, but not totally correct, because here you get a good representation of what Mennonites look like worldwide. There are more Mennonites who are people of color than there are who have European ancestry. And that's due primarily to missionaries that went out beginning in the late 1800s and evangelizing. There's the largest concentration of Mennonites today are in Africa, and with about 400,000 Mennonites here in North America. So when the Mennonite groups worldwide would get together, there would be Asians, obviously South American folks, Central American, as well as Africa and Europe and North America. The population of Mennonites in Europe is very, very small today. So foundational beliefs for Mennonites, the New Testament, obviously we would use the Bible for our worship services and so forth, but New Testament is predominantly used for Scripture. And someone came up with the idea, if somebody says, well, what do Mennonites believe? This is sort of core beliefs, but also ideal. Jesus is the center of our faith, community is the center of our life, and reconciliation is the center of our work. So as I've alluded to, there are many different groups and practices among Mennonites. If you look along that continuum and you say, well, what do you believe about this? There's somewhere on that continuum that might fit in. For instance, if you say, well, what about education? I've given an example of that. At the conservative end, it's restricted. At the progressive end, the sky's the limit. I simply say, for years, the person who was dean of the Harvard Medical School was a Mennonite, and there's lots of Mennonites in academia today. The Mennonites have 8 colleges, 3 seminaries in the country. Worldwide, there's about 1,400,000 Mennonites worldwide. You can see that the Democratic Republic of the Congo, one of the highest concentrations of Mennonites or Anabaptists, about 220,000. Ethiopia is one of the fastest growing groups of Mennonites in the world today. But we're going to transition now to talk a little bit about the Amish. And I'm going to read what someone has written to give you a little bit of a sense of the Amish. There are 2 key concepts for understanding Amish practices. One is the rejection of hochmut, or pride, arrogance, haughtiness, and the high value they place on humility, and Gelassenheit, or the calmness, composure, placidity, often translated into submission or letting be. Gelassenheit is perhaps better understood as a reluctance to be forward. And that's a term that is often talked about. Don't be forward. That's kind of, there's a Pennsylvania Dutch word called favet zich. And that, it kind of has a alliteration there that makes sense to those of us who understand it. It's better than forward in many ways. It's not seen as necessarily a compliment if you're favet zich. You're pushy. That's another way to say it. not to be self-promoting or to assert oneself. The Amish's willingness to submit to the will of Jesus expressed through group norms is at odds with the individualism so central to the wider American culture. And that is central to how the Amish think about rules, regulations, and so forth, because the Amish are very much a group of people who are interested in rules. And some of these things express themselves in their personality. They tend to be reserved, modest. It would be walking up and if a man, what I'm going to use the word English, you understand what I mean then. If an English man would walk up and talk to an Amish woman, she probably would not be very friendly. That isn't something that would be norm. You may run into one who'd be willing to talk to you, but generally they would be somewhat reserved. There's a modesty, a calmness about them generally, tends to be quiet. You see Amish families in Der Dutchman or Yoder's, or if you go to one of those places, if they have children, they tend to be fairly well behaved. Some of the symbols would be their dress. Dress is very important to them. And people ask, why do they do that? Well, if you ask an Amish person, they would say, well, this is, if they were really truthful, I think, they would say, well, this is one way we can express our difference from the world. And they would consider anybody who is an Amish worldly. So we dress worldly. So dress is one way, horse and buggies is another, the German or the Pennsylvania Dutch dialect is another one. And then we talk about structure. Their church organizations are very flat. They have basically what I would call, they have church parishes. They call them church districts. They have a bishop at the head of every church district, and he, along with two or three other ministers, pretty much guide that group of people. Generally, a group in a heavily populated Amish, there would be about 120 to 150 people, counting children, in that particular church district, and people submit to the will of that group. I know people, my parents would say it from time to time, well, you know, we don't necessarily agree with the rules, but the church has decided, and so we adhere to them. There were times when my parents said, no, you can go off to college, you can do this, you can do that, even though I was the only person in my Sunday school class that went on to college. Everybody else, the boys had virtually all quit when they turned 16. I went on to high school and then on to college. So the local church among the Amish and a lot of conservative Mennonites would be very decentralized. It's a local group that tends to make the decision, a lot of decentralization. Their values would be submission, obedience, humility, simplicity. Those are things that they would value. And along with that, this is I wouldn't necessarily consider it a value, but these conservative groups are very, very patriarchal, very male-dominated. That comes with a lot of problems sometimes. You read, and it's certainly true, that there's abuse among some of these particular groups. Somebody asked me the other day, well, you know, what about women in leadership? If you look at that continuum, obviously at the very conservative end, it is totally male-dominated. As you move along that continuum then, if you were to come to Covenant Mennonite Fellowship, you'd find a year ago we would have had, or 2 years ago, we had co-pastors. One of them is a woman. My partner, who is on the board of one of our Mennonite seminaries, he reports to me every once in a while about, well, we have more women in seminary working on an MDiv than we have men. So you understand that at the progressive end of Mennonites, it is very much, we assimilated very much into the culture. There's rituals among the Amish that they continue to practice. They tend to kneel for praying. They still practice communion, including the practice of feet washing. And then public confessions for sins and so forth is still practiced. Shunning is less practiced than it used to be, but it still does happen. When people ask about, well, what about this running around business with teenagers? It is something that a lot of communities get. It is practiced among some of the teenagers, but I tell folks, look, this is no different than my nephews and nieces and probably your children and your grandchildren. When they were in their adolescent and early adult years, they did crazy things that you didn't approve of. The Amish are no different. They get cars, they do this, they do that. The Amish have a novel, the average family, the average size of an Amish family is 7 children. And it's one of the fastest growing groups, religious groups in America. They have incredible, even with the running around, people say, well, they come back. Well, I say they never left because they do all this craziness within their own groups. And they don't necessarily go to New York and LA and Chicago and do their running around there. They do it in their own community. And they do it with their own cohorts. So they have a very high retention rate. There's somewhere between 80 and 85% join the church. So they're a group that is doubling about every 20 or to 25 years. So there's over 400,000 Amish scattered across North America. They're in 32 states, 3 Canadian provinces, and there's 1 small settlement in Bolivia, which is an outgrowth of some of these very conservative Mennonites that trace their roots to the Ukraine who decided to become Amish. So there's lots of things we could talk about, but let me just in the last few minutes here talk a little bit about Sarasota. The Mennonite community in Sarasota, the first Mennonites owned property. In fact, they bought property in Venice, hoping to farm in the wintertime. These were people who had truck patch farms up in Ohio. They wanted to come to Florida where they could do farming in the wintertime, and they bought land in Venice. It turned out not to be good land, but eventually they found the Palmer Farms, or what we know today as the celery fields, and in 1928 they bought property in the celery fields, and for 40 years plus there was farming in that particular area. And as more and more Mennonites and Amish came, they eventually found Pinecraft which was a winter camp. You think about your summer camps in the north, that's what Pinecraft was developed for. People with tents, little campers, and small housing that they could buy or build there. That Amish and Mennonites moved into Pinecraft first time in 1931. The vast majority at that time was not housed for Mennonites or Amish, but other people that came. Over time, it became the Amish and Mennonite enclave that it is today. The first permanent Mennonite congregation was in 1946. Today, there are 17 Anabaptist-related congregations, which include 3 Amish congregations. But the year-round population of Amish in Sarasota is less than 100. When you see, if you drive through on Bea Vista Street today, if you get up there, go to Yoder's and so forth, you see very few Amish. But I was going to say don't come in January or February because they're everywhere with their 3-wheel bikes. So the whole idea of people will say, well, 3-wheel bikes, is that something the Amish can have? It depends where they are. I have Amish relatives. I had 134 first cousins, so I come from a large family. Yeah, I know. It's mind-boggling. But anyway, and I don't know all of them. In fact, I didn't know very many of them. But my point is that I was visiting my cousin a year or two ago, and I asked him if he said something about having an e-bike, and I said, oh, you can have an e-bike. And he said, oh, yeah, we haven't hitched up, he called his horse the pony. He said, we haven't hitched up the pony except twice in the last year. I said, how do you go to church? And he said, well, we either walk or we take a bike. I went 2 miles down the road to another church district, another parish, talked to my cousin there, and I said, "Are you allowed to have e-bikes here?" And he said, "Oh, no." He said, "No, the church has decided." So just in that particular little area, you see the difference between various congregations. Covenant Mennonite Fellowship, where my partner and I are members, is the only, and I stress only, welcoming Mennonite Anabaptist congregation for gay and lesbian people in Sarasota. The rest of the churches are, I was trying to think about what the right word was, but the only word I can think of is hostile. It's very clear that if my partner John and I were to attend another Mennonite church, we could in a couple of them, we could probably be bench warmers and be welcome, but that would be all. They would gladly accept our money, but we would not be welcome there. Covenant Mennonite Fellowship has been around since 2000. About 10 years ago, the then pastor came out as a gay man, and all, you know what, broke loose. The congregation was going to be booted out of the local or the regional conference, and so before that could happen, they withdrew. We were not here at the time, and they withdrew, and they now are affiliated with another conference that is welcoming. Mennonite Church USA, which we are a part of, is an open and affirming denomination today. It's the largest denomination, but like so many groups, has lost a lot of people over this particular issue. But because of the decentralization over the years, that there's been a lot of division among Anabaptist groups, and that's happening among Mennonites today. Thank you very much. I'll be around for if anybody has any questions or comments. I'm happy to stay around after the service, but I certainly appreciate being here today. And just remember, today you've heard from only one Mennonite.
Thank you. We learned a lot. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our heart until we are together again. Let's stand in body or spirit and sing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. And for our benediction, I have the following. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Amen.